interwebs, and welcome to the Frak This podcast. I am your faster-than-light host, Jesse Gender, and I am joined, as always, by...
It's Vera. How much faster than light?
I mean, significantly.
I'm really sorry for your fiance, then.
Wow. Ouch. That makes no sense on several levels, but it's still painful. Honestly, if I was, given that we're both women, I feel like me being faster than light would honestly be good for her in the long run. More time for her. I mean, if I had another equipment down below, me being faster, I think would put a stop to things, but it doesn't have to stop things another way. We have already gone very far, very quickly on this podcast. Jesus Christ.
I do feel slightly bad for putting you in a position where you had to clarify your genitalia.
That's fine. I did say to you, before we were back on the Jumpgate podcast, the podcast we were doing about this, that we should tone it down a little bit for just the first few episodes of the podcast.
We have failed at that very hard.
Yeah, no, we failed very hard. Listeners, if you are new to this podcast already with episode 2, this is what you're in for. This is what you're going to be getting for however many episodes this show is.
Yeah, we did think we were gonna tone it down from how far off the rails we let ourselves go over the years, but we failed at that. So
yeah, and I blame you, Vera.
Rightfully so, as you should under the circumstances. But I suppose points for honesty. We're not being sneaky about how off the rails we are as podcasts.
Yeah, we're not trying to accept it, and we're just putting it right up front. Letting it all hang out right there.
Right in your face.
How are you doing, Vera?
I'm a little punch drunk. I had a very, very busy weekend. I had 2 burlesque shows. I had one on Friday, which was a lot of fun. It's a show that I've never been around for before or wasn't available to even watch, much less see. It was called My Chubby Valentine. And it's all heavier performers and in a range of body types. So I am at the heaviest I've been in my life, but certainly compared to some of the other performers, I probably look on the slimmer side. But there was a nice sort of mix of heights and sizes, but everybody could at least safely be called chubby. And it was a really fun, really, really empowering show. I got to do 2 numbers for that, and then the very next night, I had to host and perform a number in a venue that I hadn't been in before, but that show went really well, too.
Nice.
So, I am satisfied, but also tired.
Yeah, I know the vibe. I've had a similar thing where, the past week, I've had to do, 3 or 4 different parties.
Parties.
Not
parties.
Look, for a socially anxious person, it's a lot. I honestly hate it because I just everyone tells me, Jesse, you're fine. Inside, I am screaming. If you encounter me at a party, dear listener, inside there's a version of me just screaming.
You hear that, industry insiders who were mingling with her at these parties? She hated it. She hated every second of it.
I did. I didn't hate you, but I hated the situation. I'd rather just hang out playing board games with everybody. Can I just invite studio executives to play board games and I'll pitch my show then? That'll probably be the best way for it all to work out.
Honestly, I feel like that would lead to some more interesting shows, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think so. I honestly think that's how we should restructure everything. If I ever get a production company, that's how I'm gonna everyone who wants to pitch a show has to do it over board games.
So I feel like the amount of clout that you have is going to determine what kind of board game it's played over. Because if you're a newcomer, it's gonna happen over a game that has really short play time. Basically you have to have an elevator pitch. But if you've got past successes behind you. Like, oh no, we'll do Settlers of Catan. We'll give you some time to pitch this.
Someone with like a big money name gets like Gloomhaven. It's like, all right, Spielberg, we'll play some Gloomhaven here.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, you've done nothing so far. Okay, Dungeon Mayhem, you get 1 round. Let's go.
Okay, let's make it quick. I got time. Well, speaking of making it quick,
we're back to that already. Okay.
We're talking about the final part of the miniseries. I have no idea where that transition was going. That one crashed and burned.
That one was
just like a Viper pilot in this episode of Battlestar Galactica, the miniseries.
I did it.
I looped it back around. Yes, we are talking about the second and final half of the Battlestar Galactica miniseries this episode, as my cat crawls across my keyboard and distracts me. All right. Anyways. Alrighty. We start off the episode right where we left off last week, which is Adama believes that his son Lee had been killed in an attack by the Cylons on Colonial One, because their radar sort of showed that. We get a brief little moment where Adama's sort of trying to like hide his grief from the rest of the CIC, the bridge. And Ty sort of like takes control for a hot second, sort of gets everyone back to work. Then we jump down to the Viper Bay, where Starbuck has come in, and we see that her entire engine has been shot out, and she goes, I wonder what my engine gave out. And Chief Tyrrell is sort of wondering how she was even able to land it. But then Starbuck sort of jokingly says, all right, well, I still want to talk to, I forget the guy's name, but this guy who I talked to earlier about the fact that the gimbal was off, and Tyrrell lets her know that that guy had died in the fire alongside 85 others. And then as Starbuck sort of is taking in this news and is walking away, Tyrrell also lets her know that Apollo Lee supposedly also died as well. And she sort of takes that in. And then as she walks away, Callie, one of the other engineers that works under Tyrrell, comes to comfort Tyrrell.
Well, I want to pause because I really loved that line reading, because like he's kind of zoned out and staring into space, and like she comes over to him and, you know, and I forget her exact line, but it's kind of a "Are you okay?" line. And he says, "Get back to work," but he only like briefly flicks his eyes at her. He's mostly still staring ahead. And the line delivery felt very much like he was telling himself that a lot more than he was telling her that. It didn't read so much as him being dismissive of her, as him telling himself to just do something. Yeah.
To just suck it up and go. Yeah. No, I mean, we'll talk about it as the episode goes along, but this episode does do, at least in my opinion, a decent job of like showcasing the weight of everything on everybody.
Oh, yeah. There's stuff in a minute or so that I'm going to note with that.
Well, we do jump over to follow Boomer, who is heading her Raptor back to the Galactica after she left Gila behind last week. Technically the same thing, episode, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, he's on Caprica, and she's up front talking with a kid who we later learn is named Boxy. And he sort of starts asking her, is my dad dead? Is everyone back on Caprica dead? He's mentioned that his dad is missing. And Boomer really doesn't kind of know how to fully respond to that, but she also explains about like how hopefully the pod they said will get picked up by Galactica. And we get a shot while Boxy's sort of talking about all of this, of the families, sort of the few women and kids that got to go on the Raptor, huddled in back alongside Baltar. We also then see Baltar look up and see number 6 in a red dress, presumably a hallucination at this point, who says, you know what I love about you? You're a survivor. To Baltar.
So this is the confirmation that at this point, she is legit in his head, because when he saw her just before getting on the Raptor, it could have gone either way. Like, he clearly hadn't expected to see her, but we also know she was on the planet, so that could have been her. So it kind of begs the question, at what point has he started seeing her? And at what point was she really there? Because, like, I don't expect to ever circle back on this specific. Like, it does beg the question, what happened to her when the explosion went off, that he walked away and she wasn't with him?
Does beg that question, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I'm not saying shit.
I'm going to circle back onto some of this. I got to wait for a later point.
That is true. Anyways, we then go back to the Galactica. And we see something where like it's sort of like side struts where the Viper bays, sort of like the Vipers land on, sort of pull in when it's going into a jump, which I always thought was kind of a cool thing.
It's a neat complication because the landing bays basically have to be extended out and then tucked back in, which means that they, and this becomes a point later in the miniseries, that like if they're trying to get fighters back on board, they have to stay there with these things out, and they can't jump until they're back in. So it puts them in an awkward position if they're in a fight that they need to run away from, trying to get everybody back on board.
Which we do see becomes a thing later on. But as they go, and I'm just going to point this out, Ty calls Lieutenant Gaida, and Adama does that too. I mentioned that because I do believe his name, they pronounce his name differently when it becomes the show. They start saying Gaida instead of Gaida, so it just threw me. I'm gonna track that because that might not be the case, and I just may be misremembering. But I believe they changed pronunciations of his name, so I was like, huh? Anyways, we have them doing an FTL jump, which is a faster than light jump, where they sort of like have a countdown where there's like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they're hoping to like get right into the eye of the storm of where they're going, and they succeed. They end up right outside the nebula, and we get this really cool.
And apparently, jumping faster than light means that everybody gets the dolly zoom.
Yes, which I don't think becomes a thing. Is just this one time.
Yep.
So, but yeah, we do get that one dolly zoom shot that you see in a bunch of things. Like I think Severance is one of the more famous recent examples of it, when they're sort of going down the elevator.
It's the Hitchcock.
Lord of the Rings, Hitchcock. Yeah, Lord of the Rings, Hitchcock, a bunch of things. Anyways, we get this cool shot of the size of the nebula and how small Galactica is next to it, which I thought was cool. It was a cool little CGI shot. And then they go into the eye of the storm, essentially. So the nebula is kind of like a hurricane, I guess, and this station is sort of like right in the middle of the eye that they sort of have to go into to get to it. We then cut back to Colonial One, because, surprise, everyone is okay.
What?
What a shock. Turns out Lee used the Galactica thingies to make an EMP that made it look like a nuke to anyone that was watching, including the Galactica, but more importantly, the Cylons. Rosalind starts interrogating him, asking him questions about this. But at the end of after like answering all the questions, she says, you know what, maybe we should, because he sort of says like, this was done in war games, we had no idea if this would work. She says, maybe we've learned the lesson of do not ask follow-up questions and just say thank you for saving our collective asses, which I did like as a line. And he starts saying, Apollo begins to start taking charge of like, hey, we should get the hell, but then the president, she just starts going, it's like, yep, I'm already on it, we're moving. Oh, we had to get the hell out of here. So again, just showcasing her. She's already on top of it. We then just see a little montage where we see Galactica heading into the eye of the storm towards the station. Starbuck opens up her locker by her bunk bed, and she looks at a picture of her and Lee's brother Zach, who she had a relationship with. And she sort of looks at that and puts it off to the side. We get a shot of Captain Kelly, or a few shots, I should say, walking through all of the bodies of those who died on Galactica, taking their dog tags.
This was something I noticed. I was surprised that they showed the bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To be completely honest.
That's like a whole thing later on, too.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think that they do really well for making the damage feel real. So it's not just like, oh, we lost this many people. Like, no, here's a bunch of bodies. Like, oh, okay. And it's not like gratuitous, where they're all covered in sheets. But like just to see them laid out and to see that many, it is like, oh, damn. Okay. And I liked this because I'm going to note something later where they try and emphasize the cost of things and the damage that I fucking hated.
I think I know exactly what it is. It's coming up in just a second.
You might not understand why, though.
Okay.
You might be right about what. I think you might be wrong about why.
Okay, we'll see. We shall see. I'll take bets, people. Take bets. We also get a quick thing that I wanted to call out, that Starbuck starts praying, and she prays specifically to the lords of Kobol. So just wanted to see if you took note of that interesting distinction.
So, like, I'd caught that as a phrase before. I didn't write it down in the first half. I wrote it down, not at this moment, but I wrote it down.
It comes back up a little bit later, too.
Well, it kept being said. So that was why I wrote it down. Because initially, I didn't write it down because I'm like, this just feels like a substitution for, saying Jesus Christ. The same way that, Frak is a substitution for fuck. So I didn't think too much on it. But it gets a lot more emphasis and in some interesting ways.
Yep.
Towards the back end.
Yeah, I'll save a larger discussion for it later on, but yeah, we will need to start talking about the religion stuff in this. So we'll come back to it. But yeah, Chief goes on to Ragnar Station, the station at the center of the storm. Adama says, "Go get me some bullets, Chief." But when they come onto the station, there is a man who we later learn is named Leoben, who points a gun at Tyrell, clearly upset.
Yep.
All right.
Just random dude on a station.
Mm-hmm. We then cut to people coming onto the Galactica with Boomer. I believe this is sorry, incorrect. I lied to you. This is Boomer coming on to Colonial One.
Yes.
Yes, not the Galactica. And she says, and she starts talking to Lee about like the Vipers, saying, "Hey, I think they did something to the Vipers. They aren't working. There's reports of them all over. The only ones that are still working are old or in need of a major overhaul." And then they see Baltar getting off, and Boomer kind of has this she very clearly says very loudly, Apollo asks, is that him? And she says, "Yes, I hope he's worth it." And she says it very loud so that he can hear it. Clearly upset that her friend Hilo got left behind on Caprica.
Yep.
And then Apollo sort of says, she says sorry to Apollo, and she says, "Don't be, I hope he's worth it too." And then he takes Baltar to see the president. Then Rosalind goes and reintroduces herself to Baltar, says, "Oh yeah, we met at a symposium years ago." And Baltar's trying to be polite, but is very clearly like, "Oh yeah, I don't really remember." And he says, "I'm bad with faces." And she says, "No, it's fine. I wouldn't remember me either." Clearly acknowledging that like she's moved up in the world a little bit because of the situation.
And like there's a whole beat before he's there. He's like, "Oh, President," I forget what the name was, but like President so-and-so is alive. No.
Yeah. It's like, that guy's dead. He's dead. President Adar or something like that.
It started with an A.
Yeah.
He's dead. He's super dead. And so are the next 41 people after him who were supposed to succeed him.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyways, Rosalind asks, Baltar says, "We need someone, a consultant regarding Cylons." And then she talks to Boomer and sort of figures out, like, look, your Raptor has limited FTL jumps, so I want you to be, like, the Raptors can jump because they can sort of jump ahead of Vipers and report back. So she says, "I want you to go around and sort of find survivors and form a convoy." So Boomer gets that mission.
Yep.
So then Tyrell starts talking to, again, the man we'll learn is Leoben. And Leoben sort of says, "I'm not going to jail." And he's clearly seeming to think that he's about to be arrested and doesn't know that there's a war on. And Tyrell manages to talk him down and says, "Hey, look, I'm not giving you passage out of here or anything like that. There's 2,000 of us on this ship, so get the hell. If you think you can go through us, you can try, but otherwise get the hell out of my way." And that sort of backs Leoben down. Then we get Baltar talking to, he's on the Caprica 1. He's sort of sitting in a chair doing some work. And he starts talking to the 6 in his head. And I'm just going to let you know right now, fandom calls this character Head 6. So
Head 6. Okay.
So we'll call her Head 6 from now on.
And this was the point where I noted down, like, okay, so this is potentially, I'll circle back onto that aspect, but like potentially that this show is just doing Harvey.
Yeah, when you said that last week, and you're like, okay, I was like, you pretty much called it, because basically she's Harvey.
Yeah,
with some distinctions.
But like, I like her so far, but and just in case, because I know we have new listeners, I'm talking about my single favorite character from Farscape.
Mm-hmm.
These are some big ass shoes to fill if you're gonna try and do that, because boy,
Harvey's fantastic. Yeah,
Harvey is amazing.
I will say I do really like Head 6. I won't spoil where we go with her, but like I do like this character. So
okay,
yeah.
I have some thoughts, but I'm gonna save those for a little later.
Well, yeah, the issues with this character that occur in this episode are very much we'll get there, but the miniseries edginess that you.
Oh no, that's not it. We'll get there.
We'll get there. Anyways, she starts talking to Baltar, and he basically says like you're just an expression of my subconscious. You're only in my head. He's sort of like trying to reject her and not pay attention to her. And she starts putting back, it's like, I could exist in your head without being a hallucination. Maybe you see me and I'm here because I can transfer my image into your conscious mind. I put something in your head while you were sleeping, and that's why you can see me. So putting in this seed of doubt. And he still tries to push it away, saying, you're just my irrational fears, which I choose to ignore. And then she sits on him, clearly trying to, get him to pay attention and get him aroused. And they start talking together, and she says, I'm trying to figure out how you managed to do this attack. And, he points out like she made changes to the program. She said she was building in backdoors for a company to exploit. But she clearly, was doing it so that the Cylons couldn't move in. But then she says, that was officially, but unofficially I had other motives. And she said, we had something, Gaius. I want you to love me. And then she also says, God is love as well.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that second part happened, because I'll tell you what, when she said, I want you to love me, I went, oh, Jesus, God damn it. And then she said, God is love, and I was like, okay, hold on then. Hold on a minute. Because, like, I already kind of groaned at the over-sexualization of this character a little bit. And initially that I want you to love me thing felt like a continuation of that. But then
I'm just a hot lady who just wants the man to love me sort of thing.
Yeah. And like I accept that it's being said as a manipulation. I get that. But I'm still like kind of eye rolling at the tactic. But then like adding in the God is love, and I'm like, okay, hold up, because that is an odd sentiment to follow what you just said. I don't have any calls on what that means, but I'm noticing the heck out of it.
Good notice. Very good notice, I will say. That's all I will say here. But yes, she goes in for the kiss, and then Baltar yells no, and then we cut to what everyone else is perceiving, which is she's not there. And so they're all like, what? What's going on? Then we cut to Adama back on the Ragnar station, and he's talking to Leoben as they sort of go through and start packing up all the arms to put on the Galactica. And, Adama starts asking, like, where's your spaceship? And Leoben says, it's docked on the other side of the station. Leoben does let down here that he's an arms dealer that was coming in to steal some of these arms to get some supplies. And then Adama notes that Leoben doesn't look too good. He looks kind of sickly. But then at that moment, one of the armaments that one of the engineers are carrying gets dropped and goes off, pushing Adama and Leoben into sort of like a tunnel, and they get trapped in there. And we learn that,
more specifically, Adama like dives in and grabs Leoben with him. He's like, get down, and like they go in here, and there's a door that gets blown closed and then fused from the heat.
Exactly.
But like, it's not like the explosion knocks them in there.
Adama
dives in there.
Yeah, Adama saves Leoben's life and dives in there with him. But yeah, basically, long and short, no one's hurt by the explosion, but Adama and Leoben decide to take... Well, Adama says, don't stop to get me out. Focus on getting the armament onto the Galactica. I'll find another way out with Leoben. And Ty's in charge.
Yep.
We then cut to a botanical cruiser that Roslin is on. So it's basically a ship that basically has like a giant botanical garden. And you can sort of like see up into space from it. And she's basically talking to the captain of this ship, saying like, all right, well, we're making a survey of all the ships. You get your needs attended to, Captain. But then the president stops to a young child named Cammy. The president asks like her about her parents. We learned that her grandmother's having health problems, hence why she's on her own right now. And then the kid starts saying stuff like, "Oh, I'm going to meet my parents in Caprica City. I'm going to be going home, and Daddy's going to read to me." Very clearly, like building up like she's not fully aware of what's going on, and Rosalind just sort of like looks at her like, So Vera's given me a face. She has thoughts.
I fucking hate this kid. Now, I suspect, spoiler, this kid's gonna die. I suspect that you thought I was gonna file this under my unnecessary cruelty thing with this kid. No, I just hate this fucking kid. This is so nakedly manipulative, and this kid is written in a way that no fucking kid talks like. And it's delivered by a child actor who, like most child actors, is not a good actor. Here's the thing. There is actually no such thing as a good child actor. What there are kids who basically are the thing you wrote, but you need to have written a realistic kid. And if you didn't, no child's going to be able to do it well. And this is an unrealistic, bullshit, manipulative, heartstring-tugging machine that is passing itself off as a child. It's lazy. It's clunky. I fucking hate it. It's so nakedly manipulative. I resent it.
Yes, and that was going to be my thing, too. Like, the scene is so clearly like, oh, you should feel bad because kid doesn't really understand sort of moment. And it's like...
I mean, it's also deeply unnecessary because the show's doing such a good job elsewhere at emphasizing what is happening to people. And like that, this is impacting actual people, that's part of why this feels so manipulative. It is unnecessary on top of everything else.
I agree. And I get what it's trying to do, especially for like a later beat that we're going to get.
Oh, I get exactly what it's trying to do. And it's the fact that I get it so well and that I got it within the first 5 seconds, but the scene keeps fucking going.
So yeah, I agree completely. That is
part one of my distaste for where this is going. I have a second part. But it's a slightly different flavor because the show's going to chicken out on something. Okay.
Well, we then cut to Lee talking to the president that they found a couple other things. They found a fuel refinery ship that'll be good. They have only 40 ships have FTL, and there's other people. Then the president says like, all right, we should start putting people onto the ships that have FTL. But at around the same time, we get a scene with Boomer coming back with more ships and saying that she hasn't found anyone else. But then a Cylon ship has sort of followed her, and it starts scanning, and then the ships and jumps out. We then cut back to, a few moments later with the sort of like president's team gathered to talk. And they basically, Lee sort of puts it out here. It's like, look, we all have to jump because if we jump, they won't be able to track us, but we have to do it now because otherwise they'll come and get us and blow us all up. But the problem is that decision means that they're going to have to leave thousands behind that are still on the ships that can't jump to FTL. And ultimately, the president does order the fleet to jump.
Which was interesting because that kind of shows because the show is very much sort of setting up, or has been setting up, an initial sort of confrontation at as a who has the power between Adama and the president.
Rosalind.
I keep
Rosalind.
forgetting her name.
Laura Rosalind.
Rosalind. And it's like it's already set the stage for that just from him being like, she's a school teacher when he found out she was in charge. But what's interesting about this is it shows she is capable of making the exact decisions that he probably assumes she isn't.
The hard choices, sort of thing.
Yeah, and that can potentially, depending on where things go, make for much more nuanced conflicts between the two of them than if she was just the flat opposite of him, being like, no, we have to save her. No, like she's willing to make that call, which makes her at least at times more aligned with him than I think a lazier show would have done.
Yeah, I mean, it's really why watching all of this episode, I love Rosalind's characterization throughout the entire miniseries for the most part. Like, she is just consistently portrayed as, like, people underestimate her. They don't think she's good, and yet she is consistently shown as, like, yeah, she's willing to make the hard calls. She knows what to do. But she also knows, like, when to listen to others. Like, she's very competent at what she does, which just goes to show, frankly, I think we should have more teachers in charge of things. Yeah.
Well, tough shit. We're not going to have a Department of Education for much longer. So.
Whee! Love it. Love it. Well, they don't have a Department of Education here anymore either, so it's fine.
That's what I was saying.
Anyways, no politics in this show about politics. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry, folks. If you thought we weren't going to bring, the actual world politics into talking about the politics on the show, we are in fact going to do that.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to have any chance of getting less relevant as we go further into the show, unfortunately. Fun times.
It's like how fun all the fascism stuff was in Babylon 5.
Yeah, I kind of weirdly mirrored a lot of stuff because Babylon 5 is in a lot of ways about the building up of fascism. Yeah, and we did that at a sadly appropriate time for that. Anyways,
this is fine. Everything is fine.
We're doing great. I'm doing fine. I have a cat here. We're good. Anyways, everyone else goes off to complete that command. And Billy, who is Rosalind's assistant, whose name I forgot last episode, but his name is Billy, he stops to tell her something, but she sort of interrupts and says, I have cancer. And he says, I know. I've caught all the little things, some of just the things that you said. And she says, all this stuff is going on, and all I can think about is that I have cancer and I'm probably going to die. Isn't that selfish? And Billy says, no, it's not selfish. It's human. And then he goes to walk out, but then Rosalind sort of stops and says, hey, what do you want to tell me? And then he says, that little girl, Cammy, that you met, her ship can't make the jump.
No! Who could have fucking guessed? Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, I want to gouge this aspect out of the miniseries with a fucking spoon.
Thankfully, it doesn't stay too long because she deader than a doornail in just a second.
I have fucking diabetes from how saccharine this is. This is awful.
Well, yeah, because it's honestly the better stuff comes in right now because we jump up to the bridge of Colonial One, and we see the pilot and Lee setting up to make the jump, and they have the comm open, and they're just hearing all of the people talking to them and asking them what's it like saying, for God's sake, you can't leave us, tell us where you're going. And the pilot actually goes to tell the people where they're going because they said, oh, we'll follow you, and Lee says no, because if the Cylons get that information, they'll follow us. And then we hear things like, I hope you people rot in hell for this, stuff like that. And then the Cylons do come in right as they're making the jump. And as the ships that can jump, the Cylons blow up the remaining ship. And we get a shot of Cammy, the little girl, and we sort of push in her face and then cut to white. And I just put in my notes, Vera probably hated that.
You were right, but for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
So here's the other thing I need to call out. This is chicken shit. from a writing standpoint. We shouldn't have seen the Cylons show up.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, they should not have validated that they made the right choice. Now, like, in fairness, at the time the call was made that they were going to jump, they didn't know if the Cylons were going to show up immediately. But I don't think, if you're going to make a show about making hard decisions, one of the things that way too few shows actually commit to is the fact that when you make a hard decision, you almost never have the comfort of being assured that you made the right call. And I don't like that the show chickened out on these characters having to live with the knowledge that they left these people behind. And maybe there was time to get everyone aboard the FTL ships, but they'll never know. Instead, they know. They know for certain.
They literally got out because, like, literally as they jumped, the missiles were shot. So, like, yeah.
And that's a cop-out. That is simplifying a gorgeously complicated situation where they otherwise would have had to just live with that decision and maybe reassure themselves, the Cylons probably showed up right after we left, but they wouldn't know. They would never know for certain. And it wimped out. And that's disappointing.
Yep, I 100% agree on that front. Yeah, I think the idea was like to create like tension in terms of like, oh look, they just got away just in time. But yeah, it does pull away from the more interesting conflict. Yeah. So,
and like I'll preview a criticism that I'm gonna have later. The action tension is not. This show thinks it's a stronger asset to it than it is.
I agree. I think there are a couple moments on that. I think, and I will say that this foreshadows one of my biggest criticisms with this miniseries as well. There's a choice that wimps out on a harder decision later on in this miniseries that we'll get to. That was always my biggest criticism of the miniseries, but we will get there. Anyways, Adama. We then cut to Adama with Leoben. And Leoben is walking ahead of Adama, and Leoben sort of points out, like, oh, you're always keeping me in front of you. Suspicion and distrust must be part of military life. And Adama says, he like sort of questions this, and Leoben says, oh, I'm just an observer of human nature. Humanity is not
what Adama says, so you're an arms-dealing philosopher?
Yeah, that was it, which I liked. Also, Adama earlier continued notes, like, you look really, really sick. And it's, you must, and Leoben says, oh, it's just allergies. Anyways, Leoben starts going on his philosophies, like humanity is not a pretty race. The one step from like the like apes with animals like clubbing each other. And maybe he says Cylons are God's retribution. What if God decided he made a mistake and decided to give souls to other creatures like the Cylons? And Adama says, God didn't create the Cylons, man did, and I'm pretty sure we didn't include a soul in the programming.
Yeah. Now, we'll see if this pans out. That is, and like it's going to be doubly so with something we're going to find out in a minute. That is potentially the show seeding and hinting early on as to the motivation for the Cylons. Because if they believe that, or some version of that they are empowered on basically a holy crusade to wipe out humanity because they are God's new chosen. That would explain the preemptive strike. That would explain ignoring the surrender. That would explain the intent not to take over planets or territory, but to wipe out the species. That may or may not turn out to be the case, but it is highly viable based off how they have been behaving so far.
Yes. And yeah, spoiler here, Leoben, just to continue on this conversation, Leoben is a Cylon, as we'll later learn in like 2 seconds. But it is interesting to just reaffirm this, and I'll just point this out. Both Leoben, and I've emphasized this, Leoben and Six, both Head Six and the Six that we saw on the planet, on Caprica, are the only ones that have made reference to God singular.
That's true, because the the humans are all about the lords of Cobalt, which is plural.
Mm-hmm. Adama doesn't seem shocked by the idea of a singular god.
No, so it seems to be an understood concept.
Mm-hmm. But yes, they the two Cylons that we've seen here, or at least that talk about this stuff, both refer to singular god. So
I hope this isn't a heavy-handed. The Cylons are just an allegory for the Christian church.
No, God, no.
Okay.
God, no.
Okay.
It's
sorry.
not
I just had a flash of this because I was just thinking from what was the monotheistic religion that came in and took over everything. Oh fuck.
No. Like I'll give you that. Like the monotheist. Like there's some allusion to like Catholicism thinking in terms of like overlapping with monotheism and stuff like that. But it is not like a one for one. Like hey, they're on like they're doing the Pope or whatever. So
okay. And like, not that I have a problem with criticizing Christianity, but like, I am not signing up for however many seasons of the Christian church's bad allegory. I don't have the spoons.
I will say it is not that simple. Like, yes, they'll have some overlaps, but there'll be overlaps in both directions between Cylon stuff, human stuff. Like, it's not going to be, they're not going to be one for one. It will talk about religion and organized religion, which will certainly overlap with shit that talks about Catholicism, because that's
fair enough.
But it will not be one for one in that regard.
I didn't need His Dark Materials thing where the bad guys are just the Catholic Church.
No, God, no. Okay, it is not that simple. There will be stuff that will align with the Catholic Church, but it is not a one for one. Just like, hey, they're the Catholics. No.
Okay.
God, no.
All right.
There's deeper shit going on in terms of talking about religion and shit like that. I will preempt that for you. Do not worry.
Thank you.
Whether or not you like all of it, that'll be a different question. But like, it is not that. We'll see as we go. Yes. So then we cut to Ty, and he's on the bridge, and he sort of notes that we have 3 hours until we have all the armaments on the ship. But then 50 ships start coming in, and they get that it's colonial signals. It's the fleet. But I do like that Ty says like, don't just accept friendly ID. Confirm that. He sort of says that to D. And he does confirm it, and they learn that this is the fleet with the president on it. We then cut to Ty talking to President Roslin, and they basically have an argument. He sort of say, look, we can't carry all these refugees. We don't have 50,000 people. I have to prepare the ship for combat. And Roslin basically goes, why don't you get it? The war is over and we lost. And Ty says, well, we'll see about that. And, she says she's giving a direct order, but then Apollo sort of cuts in and says like, hey, give us at least 2 disaster pods. Like it'll help people. You can part with that. Like at least give us that. Ty notes that he said us with that, which is interesting considering Apollo's part of the military, and should be aligned with Galactica. And Ty says, all right, because you're the old man's son, and because he'll be happy to know that you're alive, you'll get the pods. And then he also says like, you have to get them yourself. But then he goes to Apollo and says, you're the senior pilot now, report to the flight deck.
And it is interesting that the first clash is her being like, survivors are what's important, and these idiots being like, no, we have to fight the enemy. I'm like, dude, with whom and for what? Mm-hmm. Like, you have no one else to back you up. You're not going to take on an entire fleet with this one goddamn ship. Mm-hmm. And like, if you're doing it for the sake of what's left of humanity, they would be better off with you sticking around. Mm-hmm. Dipshit.
It's one of those if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail situations that Ty's sort of stuck in as a mindset that Roslin's like, let's get it through your head. We lost. Like, we're done. We got 50,000 people. Anyways, we then cut to Baltar and Billy, sort of confusedly walking around the Galactica. We also have Tyrrell looking for Adama as well, and Tyrrell then runs into Boomer, who also has the kid there that was on her Raptor from earlier. And Tyrrell and Boomer go to hug each other and kiss because we we referenced earlier that they were fucking each other.
Here's what's cute about this, and this makes me all the more annoyed with Cammy, because Boxy is there, and him as an awkward kid is adorable. Because he's
just watching. He's like
making out in front of him, and he's like, "What do I do?" And like at one point, the chief like spins Boomer around, and her legs kind of go out, and the kid has to step. He's like, "Ah!" Like,
yeah,
that. And this is, I'm not going to credit the writing, because that feels like the kind of stuff that just comes genuinely out of the kid being a little bit like, I don't know what to do, but it reads really well, because like an actual kid would not know what to do in that situation. So that's cute.
No, it works. I really like it. And Boomer introduces Boxy to Tyrell as like, oh, it's a new crew member. And then we cut to, and I'm not sure. I have not, so I want to be clear, I have not watched the original Battlestar Galactica series. I should. I've heard good things about the original one, not Galactica 1980, which is its like weird sequel series. But I believe this Boxy kid is a reference to a character on that show, because there was like a young, like a Will Robinson kind of kid bumping around on that show.
I'm assuming that, because otherwise, why the fuck would you call a character that? I assumed immediately that was a reference.
Because otherwise so, it's like, but I'm not 100%.
Why? Why would you do that to a kid? That's so mean.
Yeah, listeners, let us know, because I could go check, but I want your engagement. So let us know in the comments if Boxy was a thing in the original show, and also let us know if it's worth watching the original show, because I have not done any of that. Anywho. I think the closest I got was there was a Battlestar Galactica game that I played that had, like, I think I mentioned this last episode, but it was one that was like both original series and reimagined. So like I would play the original series levels and be like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. So yeah. Anyways, but yes, we also this is sort of part of a montage during this. Duala, who had run into Billy in the first episode, she sees Billy. And she runs up and kisses him, sort of like a spur of the moment, like, I survived everything. Might as well kiss some guy.
That kind of came out of nowhere.
It did. I kind of buy it, considering the situation.
I buy it well enough, but I was like, well, let me put it this way. I'm really glad it happened after Boomer and the Chief was already a thing, because it felt like it was just creating a situation where people were relieved, and that was the energy. Because otherwise it would have been like, I don't remember you two ever even being in the same room.
Well, they had that thing where like he ended up in the bathroom and was lost for a little bit.
Yeah, you had to remind me of that. I'd completely forgotten that was her.
Yep, that was her.
And for the record, the original Battlestar Galactica series, it's 24 episodes.
We could do it.
Which I think, like, we don't have to commit right now, but my gut instinct is that's short enough to be worth doing, because even if it sucks, I think we'll just crash out for 24 episodes and be okay.
Well, the thing to do it, what would be interesting to do with it, is the original series is 24 episodes, and from what I've heard, it's generally pretty good. But then there's this, like, it got canceled, and then had a spin-off series that happened a little bit later that called the Galactica 1980. That was,
yes, I've heard that sucks.
And that one apparently sucks and is only 10 episodes. So I would be down to do the original series if A, listeners want us to do it, and B, we also watch 1980, because that sounds like a terrible fun time to me. Because I don't want to say the pitch of that show, because it might spoil the original show.
Don't.
So I won't tell you the pitch of it, but I know what the pitch of 1980 is, and it's buck wild, and I kind of want to see it. So
all right, so we might do this. This might be a thing.
Yeah. Well, we also have to get through We will watch Caprica, because frankly, Caprica I love, so we will watch that.
Yes, I know. Maybe that's what we'll have to do. Maybe once we finish this series proper, we do the original, and then Caprica, and then end on the shit show.
That would actually be fun. That would actually be a good back and forth. So we get our palate cleanser. We end on the shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see. We're already jumping way ahead, but like Caprica, I'm excited to get to as well because let me put it this way: you're gonna watch Caprica, Vera, and you're gonna be like, oh, I know where your ideas for identities got inspired from. That's because less the movie that came out, but just for listeners, I have a TV series pitch version of Identities that Vera has read the series Bible for, and it's not a 1-for-1. I didn't just whip off Caprica, but you will watch Caprica and be like, I see, I see the inspiration because I love Caprica. Again, we'll see if it holds up, but I love Caprica. Anyways, cut back to part of the montage as well as we get a reunion between Lee and Starbuck. He sort of comes up to her.
I just wrote down, dear God, don't kiss. Look, I am accepting that these two are going to hook up eventually. It's a show in the early 2000s. These are the two like traditionally attractive leads. There's no fucking way that that's not going to be a thing. I just said, don't do it yet. Like, it really feels like the loss of his brother, her, whatever they were together, is fairly recent. Don't jump into that right off, please. The tension is clearly there. They don't kiss, thank God.
Yes, there is very clearly some tension brewing here.
Yeah, not happy about it, but I kind of knew going in like that's gonna happen. That's gonna be a fucking thing.
It is interesting. What I will say about it is this: like, I do like that Starbuck is kind of the more traditionally masculine one of the two, which I kind of appreciate about that kind of pairing. So
yeah.
Anyways, let's see. They kind of have like a back and forth. There's some. I personally think there's some good like humor between the two of them, where he says, she says, "I thought you were dead," and he says, "I thought you were in the brig. It's good to be wrong, or you tend to be wrong, and you should be used to it by now." And she says, "Oh, it's a skill." So they have some just some banter, and he sort of says he's the new CAG now, which basically means the head pilot.
Yeah, that's what I figured it meant.
And so, she sort of asked him to, does your father know that you're still breathing? And he says, I'll go let him know. Cut to, speaking of, Leoben, clearly very, very sick with Adama again. Adama points out, it's like, Leoben says, like, what is this place? What is it doing to me? And Adama says, must be your allergies. And Leoben says, I don't have allergies. And he sort of reveals, and Adama sort of figures out too, that like this is Leoben is in fact a Cylon, and that the storm that they are in, this the nebula, is affecting his Cylon technology, the silica pathways in his brain, as they say, and that he's been here for hours. And so it's not something that happens right off, but it's something that sort of slowly decays them. And he sort of says like, all right, well, we're not going to be able to tell anybody that we're here because you'll be dead in a few minutes. And he says, number one, I feel more than you ever conceive. And when I die, my consciousness will be transferred to another body, and I'll tell the others exactly where you are. And I'll get to watch it happen if you kill me. But then Adama points out, if you could have done that, I think you would have already done it, but you're stuck in that body. This must be something with the storm that sort of traps you here. And then Leoben sort of throws back a line that Adama said in the first in the first half of the miniseries: sooner or later, a day comes when you can't hide from the things you've done. And then there's a big fight sequence. Leoben starts choking at Adama, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, Adama beats the shit out of Leoben and kills him. So.
Yep. So we now have our second of the 12 different bodies.
Different Cylons.
I have a question.
Yes.
What the fuck was he doing there?
My presumption was that they expected people to show up there, and he was sort of like there to just be able to tell anybody if they do show up.
Here's what doesn't work about that is like it gets said a couple of times later that like the amount of degradation that he'd had just being on the ship and being around the stuff that was making him fall apart happened over a few hours. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he could have just been planted there to wait indefinitely. Mm-hmm. And if he was only planted there a few hours ago, if they're that sure that someone's going to show up, why only leave the one guy?
Yeah, it is a bit weird.
There's going to be some holes with a later Cylon thing as well, but like this is the kind of thing that like I have a feeling I'm going to hold against the show as it goes, where it's like, ooh, and here's the Cylon reveal, and I'm going to go, that doesn't make sense though.
My memory, and this will get to a later criticism that I have of the miniseries. I think it is a problem that is heightened the most in the miniseries and gets better as the show goes along. But there is another problem. There is another problem, and I think maybe we'll have the same issue. But I have an issue with the later Cylon thing as well. That is honestly my biggest criticism of the miniseries overall. But yeah, is a thing. Yes, so we deal with all of that. So yes, the Open is one of our new models.
And apparently they bleed. So we are just straight up doing oh God, why can't I think of the
body snatchers?
Replicants from Blade Runner. Mm-hmm. We're just straight up doing that.
Mm-hmm. I told you, Edward James Olmos has a theory about how they connect. I will reveal at the end of the show. It has to be literally the series finale is when I can reveal that. So we'll do that. I will tell everyone what his theory was. Anyways, we then cut to Gaeta, Lieutenant Gaeta, talking to Baltar, and Baltar sort of reveals that he quote unquote found out that the Cylons were using his program. And he sort of says, well, you should purge all references to it in your tapes. I can tell, like, the Galactica's not, it's on there, on the ship, but they aren't networked computers, so it's not affecting anything at the moment.
It's not even, like, uploaded in the system yet.
Yeah, so he's like, you should get rid of it completely. And we also get the vibe, it's not expressly stated, but it's kind of like Baltar's trying to erase any semblance of evidence that he might. He
wants his own culpability gone.
Yes. And then Gaeta starts asking him, like, it must be hard for you. And Baltar's like, what do you mean? Because he thinks he's talking about his guilt, and he says, or the fact that he's culpable for it. It's like, just you having something that was created and twisted and used like this, you must feel some guilt about it. And Head 6 starts talking to Baltar at the same time. He's like, but you said guilt was something small people feel when they run out of excuses for their behavior. And then Baltar just starts, like, trying to hide that Capra is talking. He's like, I feel responsible, in a way, for what happened. But then she says, but you don't. That's why I fell in love with you. I do kind of like all this stuff. And Gaeta's like, it's not really your fault. It's not like you knew. And then Head 6 is like, it's not like you cheated on women, and all you can think about is Gaius Baltar. And then Gaeta sort of walks away, and Head 6 keeps talking about, like, I think we could have a real future together. I'm trying to help you. And he sort of says, how were you trying to do that? And she makes him look at a device that sort of like, looks like a smoke detector.
Sort of, with holes in it.
Yeah, like a smoke detector stuck on the Galactica, sort of above the Galactica board. That's sort of like in the middle of the CIC. And she notes that, like, this is something that you saw me have in my briefcase back on Caprica, and that it's a Cylon device. And so he puts two and two together to assume that there must be another Cylon on board this ship. So,
I'm going to say something now, but it's an incomplete thought because I'm going to come back to it in, like, 2 scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But this would appear to confirm that her story of, like, I put a chip in your head to be accurate because she's providing him knowledge that he wouldn't otherwise have. Because, like, he remembers seeing the device in her briefcase, but he also never noticed it as anything before. Mm-hmm. He even says, like, you told me that was your organizer. And she just goes, yeah, that would be a lie. So it would appear, we'll circle back in a couple scenes, it would appear that this would validate that she is not a pure creation of his head, but is in fact what she claimed to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would push back against that. Now maybe you'll...
Don't yet. Wait till we circle back.
All right, because I would push back against that reading, but we'll get there.
Wait.
We'll get there. Well, the very next scene, because we cut to a commercial break, and then we come immediately back to this scene, essentially.
Yeah.
And he's still looking at the device, and he's basically trying to figure out how he can, reveal that it's a Cylon, that he knows it's a Cylon device without arousing suspicion. And he's sort of questioning what it is. I don't know what it is. And she says, I don't know what it is. It hasn't exploded yet. And I'm just guessing, she says. Mm-hmm.
That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The fact, now she glosses over this, I don't know what it is, but it's why the fuck did you have it?
Mm-hmm.
Why would it be in your briefcase
Mm-hmm.
if you didn't know what it was? Which would seem to make it not only back and forth, we don't know, it would actually make it more likely that she is purely an invention of his head.
Mm-hmm.
Because no, she doesn't know anything he doesn't know. Because the only thing he knows is that he saw her with it.
Mm-hmm. And he might, and like you said also that she points him out to see it, but he could have subconsciously noted it and then pointed it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So she does not appear to actually concretely know anything that he himself would not know at the very least subconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what would not hold, at least as presented so far, is the idea that there was no actual her back on Caprica. There kind of had to have been.
Mm-hmm.
At least for a few different points, because otherwise this whole thing is spun off into maybe the entire thing is in the main character's head. At a certain point, you have to stop. Something has to be real, or it becomes meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
So I am still assuming that when we saw her on Caprica with him, that was real. Because we also saw at least a version of her doing things independent of him. Whether or not that was the same version of her that was actually with him, I don't know if that's true or not. But some version of her.
We do see her kill a baby on Caprica.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But he also wasn't there for that. So that may have not been the same one that he was bonking.
Well, we also see her have a meeting with someone immediately after talking to him, too.
Yes.
So.
But there was a version of her that was real and he did interact with.
Mm-hmm. Whether or not this one is real.
Whether or not this is, honestly, it feels, so far at least, that what the narrative is doing is trying through nonchalance to lead the audience to think that her story is valid while not actually solidly backing up. Which does not technically make it impossible that there is a chip inside his head, etc. But in my mind, it makes it less interesting if that's true.
Well, I'm not saying anything.
At least at this point. Depending on where the story goes, it might be more interesting for that to be true. But as presented so far, I'm going to say that's the less interesting option.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and I think the show, at least at this point, seems to agree with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I will say nothing. Well, speaking of that, Baltar starts coming up with this plan because he's and she starts having sex with him in the middle of the room too. So that's that bit. But when she does that, Aaron Doral comes up, and he starts asking questions how many civilian ships use the CMP program, that sort of stuff. But as Aaron Doral walks away, Baltar starts concocting this plan of he might be a good person to implicate as a Cylon agent, because, he's a civilian, he's an outsider from the military crew, he's been on board this ship for weeks, so he could easily implicate him as the person who put the thing on there, and thereby because basically what he's trying to do is figure out a way to, tell people that he knows that's a Cylon device without revealing himself as having too much information about the Cylons.
Yes.
So yeah, he figures it out, and then he says there is one problem though, and I love this because Caprica 6.
I wrote this down too.
Yeah, Caprica 6 says morally, and he says
Caprica 6.
Sorry, Head 6. Head 6. Yes, Head 6.
Okay.
You were just talking about Caprica. Same thing.
Head 6. But you did it earlier as well.
Oh yeah.
That
legitimately means nothing. Head 6, Caprica 6. Well, yeah, whatever. That's not a big thing. But yeah, Head 6.
Okay.
Where was I? Yeah. So sorry. Going back to the point that I did Baltar says, there is one problem, though. Head 6 says morally, and he says practically, which is no one knows that the Cylons look like humans yet. So I love that. I love it because he's like, he's not worried about...
What? No. Morally, there's no issue at all. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to that earlier thing, too, about like him not being like, oh, guilt is just something small people feel. It's this whole like, I don't give a shit. I'm going to do what benefits me, and I fuck everything else. So, that's the kind of character we're dealing with. Again, I love Baltar. He's a piece of shit, and he's fun to watch. Anyways, we then have a scene between Ty and Adama, really briefly, and it immediately it cuts from like Baltar saying they don't know that Cylons look like humans now to Ty and Adama basically being like, oh, I guess the Cylons look like us now because of Leoben. Yeah. And Adama sort of points out like they could be anyone, they can anything or anyone. And so he also lets Adama know that Lee is alive. And then we cut to Lee going into Adama's office. Adama's not there yet, and he sees the picture of his brother, Zach, that's sort of framed there. And Adama then comes in, and it's a very simple scene, but Adama just comes in, looks at him, and says, "I'm sorry." And Lee says, "I gotta go," and he's going to head out, but Adama stops him and hugs him, and then Lee hugs him back after a second. It's like two set lines, but the actors really sell it. It's very well done, I think. So. Yep,
they handle their interactions really well, which is good because again, this is another thing that could have been real trite.
Yeah, no, and I like obviously there'll be tension going forward between these two at different points, obviously, but like I do like that the series doesn't like really super overplay the like daddy issues based on the son's death sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, it'd be very easy to do.
But yes, we have Ty and Adama telling Baltar about Leoben, and basically being like, we know about him. We know that the Cylons look like humans, and Baltar's trying to play it off as like, oh, that's so surprising. He's
shock of shock.
It's very like I love the actor James Callis does such a good job because like you could buy that like he's not overplaying that he knows like so that they would be suspicious, but he plays it just enough where like we as the audience can kind of tell like he's faking it. Like it's such a hard line to walk as an actor, and he does it really really well. Of like ceding to the audience that they know that he's faking it, but like not overplaying it so that like you'd be like the character should know that he's fucking up or whatever. So it's fun
it's a hard thing to get right when it comes to. Making sure the audience catches something, but not making it so obvious that it's like, why did none of the other characters catch that? And like some tones you can get away with it, like if it's a silly enough kind of thing. But then there's other times like, what the hell, man?
But yes, but yeah, they basically want him to try to figure out something to do about this because like he's the Cylons are like they need to find a way to detect the Cylons essentially, and he says I'll give it my all, Commander. And he also said, and Ty says, don't let anyone know this information yet because we don't want people to accuse neighbors of being Cylons.
I wonder if paranoia is going to be a running theme.
I wonder. Doubles and duplicates? That never happens in that genre, ever.
No, definitely not.
Anyways, we then cut to Starbuck being sent out on a recon mission. No heroics, just go out and see what's going on out there outside the nebula. But then as Apollo's walking away from telling Starbuck this, she reveals to him is that Zach, his brother, failed basic flight. I passed him because we had a thing. I felt something and I couldn't fail him. And Apollo says, why are you telling me this now? And she says, it's the end of the world, Lee. I thought I should confess my sins. So,
yep.
So Apollo has been blaming Adama all this time, but at the very least, Starbuck is in some ways equally, if not more, culpable for what he's been blaming his father for. Anyways, we then cut to Captain Kelly going to arrest Aaron Dorrell, and because Baltar turned him in, so like Doral is like chained up in the brig, and he's like screaming, yells like, "I'm not a Cylon. What are you talking about?" But Baltar basically concocts this whole story of like, I took some secret samples of everybody, and his samples registered as synthetic. And Capra 6, I keep wanting to say, Head 6 points out Dr. Baltar, and with that, Dr. Baltar invents the great Cylon detector. And like Aaron Doral like starts going off like, I'm human, I'm from the South Side, I have like all these credentials, but no one's listening to him and no one's really believing him. And Kelly says, I want everyone to be, or Ty is now I think here now, he says, I want everyone to be screened. And then Baltar also mentions the odd looking device. So yeah.
Now I'll be really curious to see if this eventually bites him in the ass. Because he just, quote unquote, invented a detection method that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone else thinks it does.
Mm-hmm.
And he does know that there is a Cylon on the ship. So this is one thing that, like, I'm hoping doesn't become a writing issue. Because it feels like somebody as self-preserving as him should realize that while he has solved his immediate issue, he has created a new one for himself. Because if he doesn't come up with an actual test that works, like, immediately, then when he claims to have screened everybody, and then somebody turns out to be a Cylon anyway, and it was somebody he cleared, he's going to have a fucking problem.
Mm-hmm. I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
Anyways, so we have a quick little scene where Ty sort of takes down the device and they get rid of it, that they notice that it wasn't supposed to be there. Ty sort of like gently calls out Gata for never, pointing out that there was a strange looking device because he thought it was just part of the museum. But then Ty also takes responsibility too. He says, I should have noticed, like basically the XO should have noticed it as well. And I want every inch of the ship searched for other equipment that just appeared in the last week. So we then cut to Starbuck going through the nebula. Her readings get messed up and she looks up and she sees that a Cylon base star and a fleet is out there. So they're waiting for them outside the nebula.
Yep, and it's a lot of ships.
Mm-hmm. We then cut to Adama going into a meeting where Roslyn is being briefed by Billy, and she says, "Keep going," as Adama comes in. There's a few different things they get mentioned, but the big one that he sort of goes through is the fact that there's a ship called the Astral Queen that has 500 criminals in its cargo hold that were there being transferred, and they were considering spacing them, but she says, no, they're human beings, and so we're going to treat them like that, and if there's any mysterious deaths, then they will be without the help of the Galactica. So she sort of says that in front of Adama, sort of like she can sort of like, it's a little bit of a power move there in terms of the dictating that. But also, yeah, it's a interesting question about the criminals. Like now they have to deal with criminal stuff as well. So.
Yeah. And it becomes one of those things like, this seems like small potatoes. Maybe we should just let it go. But then again, like, maybe these people really should be locked up, but it's kind of like, well, we have nowhere to put them. So,
and also you need people. You don't have a lot of humans left, as she'll make a point of saying later on. So,
yep.
Anyways, yes. So Billy leaves, and Adama, Rosalind's first thing she says, "Do you plan to stage a coup?" And he says no, and then she says, "Well, then you acknowledge my authority." And he says, basically, my plan is to repair the Galactica and go back out and prepare to fight. And she points out, like, there are 50,000 civilians that need your protection. We need, and he says, like, we need to go out and fight. And she sort of says, why do I have to keep telling you this? The war is over. And he says, it hasn't begun yet. And she says, that's insane. The only sane thing to do here is to run. Go wherever, another star system, another planet. this ship will, and Adama says this ship will stand and it will fight. But she says the human race is about to be wiped out. We have 50,000 people, and if we are going to need to survive, we need to get out of here and start having babies. So, she's not wrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, not wrong at all.
Mm-hmm. So you can start seeing the different the civilian versus military mindset coming into conflict there.
Yeah, because like his position is we need to win the war, and she's like, no, war's over. Survival, my dude.
Mm-hmm. But yes, Starbuck comes back and tells them about the base stars and everything, and that they're waiting for them. And they basically sort of glean the idea of like, well, look, it's easier for them. It's easier for them to wait for us to come to them because they don't need food or anything like that. They can just sit there. So they're trying to figure out what best to do, and the idea would be initially that like we can jump out of there. We need to clear the storm in order to jump out of there, but we need to get a good FTL fix essentially. But they were going to leave the civilians behind, saying like, hey, you all stay here. You're protected in the storm and such. But then they point out it's like, they can just come in here after you're gone. Like they can survive a few hours. So like that's not really not gonna really do anything. And while all the people are arguing about this, Adama notices that Billy goes up and chats to Dwala, and it's just like a little meet cute at work going on between the two of them. And Adama basically watches this and sort of says, we better start having babies. And Ty says, is that in order? And he says, maybe eventually. But basically it's him sort of acknowledging that Rosalind is right. And that they need to...
And he repeats the point, war's over, we lost.
Yep, he does. And Lee, when he says that, Lee actually says, my father's right, we need to get out of here. And I love Edward James Olmos. He has, it's a very subtle smile. Like, it's just like, oh, my son acknowledged that I was correct. It's like one of those, like, oh, we're on the same side on something. So it's just a small little acting moment that I really liked. But yeah, they basically... come up with this plan that the Galactica will go out, will run defense as the rest of the civilian ships start jumping away. And then the Galactica itself would jump after that point. And they said, okay, they figured that out. And, Ty sort of asked, what changed your mind? And Adama says, you can ask. But that's about it. And then Ty says, what do we do with our prisoner? And we see that they leave Aaron Doral behind. He's yelling like, don't leave me, I'm not a Cylon. But they close him and leave him behind on the station.
Yes.
And then they execute the big action sequence. So bunch of stuff that happens here. You can stop me at any point, but I'm just going to start running through the big action sequence here.
I mean, like, the only thing I'm going to point out is the attempts to make it look like handheld photography in space work right up until this shit. Mm-hmm. Because it just becomes a bunch of shaky moves and out of focus stuff and like things whizzing past the camera. You can't follow the geography of the scenes hardly at all. And it wouldn't be that bad if the scene didn't go on for as long as it does. If it is going to be this visually chaotic, it should be about half the length of time that it is. And if it's going to be this long, it should be visually clearer.
I didn't have that much of a problem with it, but again, I'm kind of
This is not atrocious, but I did flag this as like, for the shooting style they're using, this is going too goddamn long. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're going to have a sequence this long, I expect better visual clarity of what it is I'm looking at than this.
I will argue that I don't mind it as much, but I agree with you. Like it's one of those things where like I'm more forgiving of it because I'm used to it, and also is like this is one of the first shows to do it this way, so I'm a bit more forgiving of it that way. And
again, like, I'm not saying the handheld stuff in space never works. It works fine when, the ships are just traveling or we're getting establishing shots or, it's singling one thing out. But in the chaos of a fight, nah, don't like it for that. That it is a situation where I'd be like, you know what? You could ease back on your visual gimmick a little. for the sake of a better scene.
Well, like I said, we'll see. I'm curious to see how it'll evolve as the series goes on, because this is the first time they're doing it. So we'll sort of we'll track it. I'm curious, honestly.
Alrighty.
I'd be more curious to just see if you think it gets better. Anyways, we basically just a quick run through all of this. The Galactica goes out there. The Cylons launch fighters. The Vipers get launched as well. And there's some cool stuff here where like the Galactica puts down suppressing fire, which sort of establishes a perimeter that the ships can go out through, and also the Vipers can sort of pilot in based on like the suppressing fire that they're able to stop the nukes at. The Battlestar nukes at. Some Vipers do get blown up, but the civilian ships start jumping away and things like that. Apollo does get hit at one point, and it looks like a nuke is coming right for him, but Starbuck saves his ass and says, "Come on, bitch," and he says, "I've had worse." So I just like their back and forth there. The civilians do get all away. And then the Vipers start having to come home, but because Apollo has been hit, he's sort of stuck there. Adama calls Starbuck and says, "What do you hear?" And she says, "Nothing but the rain. Then grab your gun and bring the cat in," which I just like is a fun little line. It's a reference to one of the first scenes that they had earlier on in the miniseries. And Apollo does not have any power left, so Starbuck rams his Viper. And he says, "You are beyond insane," and sort of guides him in really hot into the Galactica, and they sort of crash into the Galactica as its struts are sort of pulling back in just in time as the Galactica jumps away. So you say the shooting of it isn't great to you. I actually like the shooting of it aside. Like I think just in terms of beats of an action sequence, it's like beated out well in terms of like there's some good character beats. Like from the Starbuck saving Apollo by ramming him and shoving him right into the Galactica. So like I like, again, visuals aside, I think like the action in terms of like how it's beated out character wise, I think really works.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to disagree with that. It's a well planned, well paced action scene that I don't like how they filmed it.
But yeah, I like, again, it shows off Starbuck being like a bit of a like. You know, she's willing to take risks in a wild way, whereas Apollo's a little bit more reticent. The connection between Adama and Starbuck, I should say, is in there as well. So, like, I like it all pretty much for the most part. Anyways, we then cut to the ceremony for the dead. Because we have a priest, the same priest who did the inauguration for Roslin, sort of presiding over the just the dead bodies on the Galactica. Again, it's noted that she says that she is a priest of the Lords of Kobol. And she sort of has this line is, "You led us from Kobol and found the 12 worlds. You led us to you'll lead us hopefully to a new home where we may start anew." And she says, "So say we all," and everyone sort of says it back, "So say we all," very weakly. And sort of like and like a kind of a religious sort of recitation, like as with you and also with you sort of thing. And Adama sort of goes in front and says, "So say we all," and he says it over and over and over again until they say it louder, which is the bigger one at the end. I'll just say this is like an iconic moment from the series as well, the "So say we all" bit.
That makes sense.
But yes, he starts giving a speech. He says, "I bet you're all thinking that they're the lucky ones. You know, we're a long way from home. We've jumped into our charter space. We have no allies, no hope. You're starting to wonder, would it have been better to have to die quickly rather than the emptiness of dark space? However, our religious text said life here began out there. It's the first words of our sacred scrolls." And that was the thing that the Lords of Kobol told us countless centuries ago, that we are not alone in this universe. There is a 13th colony that a 13th tribe went out and made their home called Earth around a distant star. And he says, "I know where it is. It's the most guarded secret we have, a location known only by the top commanders in the military. I'm going to take you there. The road is going to be long and it won't be easy. But on the memories of those lying here before you, we shall find it. And Earth will become our new home." And then "So say we all," and everyone sort of says it back really loudly, and everyone claps at it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, the fuck?
Mm-hmm. I'm curious what you think, because I know, but...
Well, I know you know. So, like, here's the thing. First instinct is that we're dealing with humans.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the technology, while not necessarily a one-to-one with Earth technology, it feels like a natural evolution of a lot of Earth technology. So initial instinct is to say that, yeah, they still originally, like, way back came from Earth, but this is so far down the line that connection has been lost.
Mm-hmm.
However, that doesn't really track with what is being said here, because they're saying, like, that they came initially from Cobalt with the idea that Earth is the 13th colony, which would lead instead to the notion that human beings on Earth are an offshoot of what had been a colony from these people, and we're just dealing with an entirely non-terrestrial group of people who happen to be human. Now, if that's the case, that's got a whole bunch of other issues. Just, logistics wise, if that's what you're going to try and do, because then it just begs the question. So, like, is Earth our Earth? Because if so, like, that doesn't fucking track at all. None of that works. Or is it like a completely fictionalized version of Earth that isn't even really parallel to ours? The real cheap answer would be, it just happens to be the same word. It's like, fuck off. Like that would be the absolute bullshit answer. But yeah, I'm kind of being left. It's funny that this is happening, because I had a similar experience happen relatively recently, because I have a Patreon supporter who has commissioned me to read multiple books in Ian M. Banks's Culture series. And my assumption starting to read those was that the Culture was a very, very far in the future offshoot of humanity. Last year, he had me read one of the early short stories that kicked all this off, which made it clear, no, actually, they are not from Earth at all. They actually were observing Earth in the 70s and already had this massive technology. So I'm kind of having that same sort of, God damn it, wait a minute.
Well, I mean, that's
kind of a thing.
That what I will say, and I don't want to, I'm trying to make sure I don't spoil anything. I mean, that's the question of the show, right? Like, the big mystery box element, I would say, of the show is, like, what is Earth in relation to these people? So, yeah, what we're learning here is, according to the myths that they have, is that there was another planet, Cobalt. Humanity left those, and there were 13 tribes. They formed 12 of the colonies, but there was a mysterious 13th tribe that went off and settled Earth. So the question is, what is that? Is it our Earth? Did they go and found the Earth that we're at right now? And so the Earth, like, that we're at like what we have right now is the Earth that they're searching for? Is it a different Earth? Is it like an Earth in the past, Earth in the future? Like, is the Cobalt Earth or not? Is like there's a billion different like ways that this could go. But that is kind of the central question of the show, of what the fuck is Earth in relationship to this show.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a good question.
So I will not spoil that, but yes, that is a question that will be a central mystery of the series. Okay. But yeah, so now, and also the goal of the show is get to Earth. Anyways, we then cut to Ty going to see Starbuck. Well, actually, sorry, roll it back to should also mention, because we touched upon it earlier, but I'll bring it up again here. So yeah, Lords of Cobalt is like a different religion than the God stuff, just to be clear too. So like,
yeah, okay.
we'll get more into that as the series goes on, but like at least wanted to touch upon that briefly here. All right, now we go to the scene where Ty goes to see Starbuck at her bunk, and basically Ty is trying to bury the hatchet. He's like, hey, it was a hell of a piece of flying out there saving Lee. You're the best pilot the commander's ever seen, and you proved it. Yesterday during the poker game, I was out of line. And he says, I'm sorry. And then he says, do you have anything to say? And Starbridge says, you're a bastard. And he's like, you don't know when to keep your mouth shut. I'm offering you a clean slate. And she says, I think you're dangerous because you're weak and because you're a drunk. And he sort of gets her, basically sort of says, does 10 hut sort of thing. And she says, yes, sir. He says, your return to flight status. Let's see how long that lasts. So clearly these two are not going to be besties.
Nah, not so much.
Mm-hmm. We then cut to a scene between Roslyn and Adama. Roslyn comes in and it starts to seem like she's like going to talk about the Adama's changing decisions. And he says, you were right. I was wrong. Let's leave it at that. And then she points out, like, there's no Earth. You made that up. President Adar and I talked about it, and the president knew nothing about Earth. What are the chances that you do? And he says, he admits that yes, that there it is, but he's doing it because it's not just enough to live. You have to give some people something to live for. So let it be Earth. And she says, they'll never forgive you. And he says, maybe, but I think I've given us all a fighting chance to survive. Isn't that what you said, the survival of the human race? And then she says, I'll keep your secret, but I want something in return. Civilization needs a government, a civilian government run by the president of the colonies. And he says, all right, so you'll be in charge of the fleet, but the military decisions will stay with me. And he says he'll think about it. And he calls her Madam President.
Yes, I did note that.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the conversation is slightly weird because, like, she words her, like, you made it up question in a way. She words the question in a way to suggest that he even made up the idea of Earth, but that makes no sense because he seemed to be pulling from a concept that people understood.
Yeah, people know Earth. Yeah.
Just claiming that he knew where it was. So, like, her wording on her question was a little odd. Mm-hmm. But yeah, people know the idea of Earth. It's the he knows where it is concept that was bullshit. So yeah, that's a solid setup for a series.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like it was a pilot, kind of.
I know.
Uh-huh. Speaking of pilot setup, we have Head 6 talking to Baltar, and she says, we will find you. It's a big universe. And that there are Cylons agents living among you waiting to strike. And she even makes note that some are sleeper agents who may not be programmed to even know that they are Cylons until activation. Now,
that's interesting because that potentially is the first thing that properly he would not have known on his own. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not impossible. It's not impossible for him to have come to that conclusion as maybe that's what's going on. Mm-hmm. But while that is a piece of information he could maybe have guessed at, taking it as fact, that is not something he would know that she is telling him.
Well, I think I'd have to go back and rewatch it. I think she says some of them may be sleeper agents, I think is the way she words it.
She does word it that way, but like, so far, and again, I'm not saying it's impossible for him to have gone down this train of thought, but so far, nothing's really happened that would give him a reason to even subconsciously suspect that as yet.
So the way I read it is I think the show is still trying to play it both ways.
Oh, no. They are. I'm just noting that this one is leaning in a direction that is not the same direction other things were leaning. Mm-hmm. So that to me strikes me as the show not necessarily trying to hit the middle every time, but when they go one way, they try and give something else that goes the other.
Yeah, I think that's basically the vibe. Because I think you could make the argument that like if she had said there are sleeper agents definitely among you, and then we take that as read for the series going forward, I would say okay, that's definitively in one camp. But her saying they may be sleeper agents, that you could chalk up as her giving him literal information, but it also could be him thinking it out, being like, oh yeah, that might be a possibility, and then just being literalized through her. So yeah, it could go either way. But yes, I do agree it does lean in the direction opposite from the other direction that the other stuff was going. So yes, the show will flip-flop, but I think it's giving, at least for now, plausible explanations either way. So,
yes.
We then get a little bit of a montage We get to Ty goes to his office and throws out his alcohol, but also sits there and looks at it for a little bit. We get to see Boxy goes to hang out on the flight deck and have dinner with some of the pilots, like Boomer and such. Starbuck takes the picture of Zach and Lee and sort of centralizes it in her mirror when she had tucked it off to the side earlier. We get Dual and Billy get a little bit. We have Tyrell repairing a Viper. But the biggest one is Lee walks Adama to his quarters door, and Lee clearly wants to say something, but Adama sort of stops and she says, let's save this for another time, and says goodnight. And it's very it's a nice goodbye between the two. But then Adama goes into his office and he finds a letter that says there are 12 Cylon models. So we don't know for sure who gave him this. Presumably it's
that
both.
was my question. Where the fuck did that come from?
Like, it possibly could have been Baltar, because Baltar does know this information, but we don't know that for sure.
Yes.
So.
But I mean, like, even if that came from Baltar, who does Adama think it came from? Because if he doesn't have an idea of who told him this, then he would be in the best position to assume it's counterintelligence, not accurate intelligence. So he has to think it's from somewhere.
Well, maybe we'll see how that shakes out. He will see if he suspects anything, takes it as read or not. So, but yeah, the only person that we know for sure could have given him this information is Baltar, but we don't know if it was or not.
Yes.
But certainly he would have motivation to. Anyways, we then cut to what is my biggest problem with the series. And I'll just say this right up front, and then we'll get to the last bit of it, because I want to focus more on the last bit of it. But my biggest criticism is we cut back to Aaron Doral, who is getting sick on the station. So it is confirmed that Aaron Doral is, in fact, a Cylon. We'll get to the rest of the scene in a second, but I want to focus on that bit.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah.
What the fuck? So, in universe, this basically means that Baltar randomly happened to frame a Cylon out of sheer dumb fucking luck. Or actually, let me back up. This, because I would argue this actually impacts Head 6, potentially. Possibly in a way that wasn't intended. Because I'm left with one of two conclusions. One is, Head 6 pointed Baltar to him knowing that it was real.
Well, I will give a point.
And I know in the conversation that he picked him out. I do remember that. But she did kind of... she said, I don't remember how to. No, well, yeah, she knows how to manipulate him, but she does also say, I never saw him in any of the Cylon meetings, which could be a lie on her part, but it also could be that she could be in his head and didn't know. But like the idea that he randomly picked an actual Cylon, like what the fuck? There's 2,000 people on that fucking ship.
Yes,
What the fucking hell?
I agree. This was what I was alluding to earlier when I say I think this is the weakest part of the show. Now, let me be clear. Having seen the show, I like this actor. He obviously does come back, and he will have parts to play as the series go on. So I like the character and what they do with him. However, this reveal I think is really bad because it is just one of those he just randomly happened to pick the guy, and it also lessens the impact of they left a guy. It's the same thing with the ships earlier, which is they could have had this thing of they don't know if he's a Cylon or not, and them choosing to leave him could have been just one of those things that they just have to live with. And to be fair, the crew does not know that yet. Whether or not they'll meet him in the future, who's to say? But they at the very least don't know it right now, so it doesn't undercut it for them as much as the stuff with the fleet or them abandoning the people without FTL drives did earlier. But it still kind of is in that same thing, undercutting it a bit for the audience. For oh yes, he was definitely a Cylon. And yeah, it is one of those sheer coincidences that Baltar picks him. I will give it some grace a little bit. I still think it's the worst decision. I don't like it. But it will be you could read it as Baltar's just very smart in the sense that he picked the guy that makes the most sense to have been a Cylon. And yes, he was just doing it to frame the guy, but by doing so, he was smart enough to pick the guy that made the most sense to actually have been a Cylon to place the device. So it kind of just it was, yes, he was the perfect guy to have done it because he was the perfect guy to frame, because he also was the perfect guy to have done it. You know what I mean?
Except that doesn't work because we're about to find out that there's at least one other Cylon on the fucking ship.
To be fair, that one doesn't have access to the bridge. Typically, she's a pilot.
But like, still, it
would be weird for her to be on the bridge. Let me put it that way. So
okay, fine, but it also shows that they have had Cylons on this ship for way the fuck longer than this guy has been there.
Yeah, do we know that? He's been there for several weeks.
He's been there for several weeks. Boomer, in theory, needs to have been there for a fair bit longer than that.
Not necessarily. She's had a relationship with Tyrell, but that doesn't need to have been years.
Okay, so concrete information, no, we don't know that for certain. Let me put it this way. Given that the ship was in the process of being decommissioned, it would be weird to put a new ground crew person there a few weeks ahead of decommission. Impossible? No. Fucking weird and a massive contrivance if we're going to find out that happened.
I'm not going to say either way. I'm just saying theoretically we don't technically know that. And we also don't know how long they've been seeding people too, either.
Well, yeah. And that's kind of my point. I'm saying, like, I don't buy that he was smart enough to just pick a guy who was plausible and it happened to be like it. No. I agree.
It is I agree. It is very contrived. I'm playing slight devil's advocate because I know people will bring it up. I agree with you. I think it is very contrived. I will give it a little bit of like, all right, you can devil's advocate a little bit there, but I agree with you. It is very, very coincidental. The only other thing I will say that I do like about it is there were hints towards this throughout the, I was rewatching, as we're rewatching the miniseries, like Aaron is the one who is consistently like, trying to stir shit throughout the entire time. So like, for example, he's the one that asks Apollo, like, hey, you need to get up here and like, get this woman out of being in charge. He's also the one that like asks her, he asks her like, who put you in charge, that sort of stuff. He
also was on the side of, we shouldn't jump right now. We should be
he was
getting
more people,
these people, taking the time to transfer people off the non-FTL ships.
Yes. So, and also he was the one, notably, that asked Baltar how many of the non-FTL, or the civilian ships still had his program. So that was another thing that he did ask as well, so during stuff. So, yeah, it's just, rewatching him, like, yes, I think that it is, the fact that he picked him out of everyone is contrived, and I dislike that it's revealed as Cylon. That being said, they do lay his characterization well throughout the entire series to like run that line of he could have been either way, and it makes sense that the choices that he makes make sense for him to have been one.
Yeah, I don't call bullshit on him being a Cylon. I call bullshit on Baltar just happening to frame the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what I call bullshit.
Yes. So yeah, I agree completely. It is the thing that like even as a kid when I didn't know shit about storytelling, like when I was a young kid watching this show and I was like, I don't know how to fucking write a story. I just think this show's cool. I call bullshit on that. I'm like, that makes no sense. Like I specific, like every time I think about the miniseries, ever since I was a kid, I specifically remember this and disliking this choice. So I wanted to call it out because it is one that has stuck with me since I was a kid. That bothered me.
No, fair.
Yeah. That being said,
I alluded to it. Did we? We didn't actually establish the other one that gets.
Well, that's what I was going to get to right now. That being said, we focus on the fact that Aaron Doral is in fact a Cylon. The doors do open. This Aaron gets rescued, and we see a bunch of other Cylon models come in. A bunch of sixes, what we'll just call sixes, Leobins, and more Dorals. And they start talking. They say, we can't let them go. They'll return one day and seek revenge because that's what they do. So it kind of leans into that idea too of how they see humans, of like, humans just want to seek revenge and blow things up, which is distinct that they're putting that as a human motivation because it means that it might not be their motivation to get revenge. So I'll put that out there.
Yes. They are just laying out that that's a thing humans do.
Yes. So if they're doing that, one would presume that that's not their motivation. And they also say it may take decades to track them down. And then we cut to Boomer, someone who looks like Boomer, coming up, and she says we'll find them. So Boomer is revealed to also be a Cylon. This is not Boomer. This is a different Cylon version that we're seeing here, but it is someone that looks just like her, so a different model.
Yes.
And before we talk about that, just really briefly, I should also note, just as a nice little reference thing, the Cylons say to Boomer walking in, "By your command," which is the thing that the Cylon said in the original show. The robots would go, "By your command." So it's a nice little, it's a little reference. Doesn't make sense because if I recall, I don't think Boomer is technically higher up in a hierarchy than them, but it's a reference. Anyways, but yeah, so the Boomer we've been watching is a Cylon,
which I did know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, did you? Okay, I
did. Like, my memory of the reveal on that is quite different, so I don't know if I caught part of a later episode. So because I don't remember seeing this, but like my memory either scrambled it with something else, or like I caught like a different part later on from down the line. But yeah, I did know that.
I'm sad by that because I was curious to see your reaction to it, because I remember I told you I watched the series and then came back to the miniseries, so I did already know that, so this was not a reveal to me. Yeah. So I was curious to see your thoughts, but you also weren't shocked either.
Sorry, I already knew.
You ruined everything.
It is kind of funny to me that just in the miniseries, they've already burned off a quarter. Mm-hmm. No, a third.
A third.
A third of the Cylon models. Mm-hmm. Strikes me as potentially a little bit wasteful. We'll see how it goes going forward. I suppose it depends, like, the manner in which new reveals are deployed. It might make more sense to have them spaced out, but it was very strange to me that we went through 4 right off the damn bat.
I would say, like, I understand it to a degree. You don't have so many that you're like, I guess every cast member's a Cylon. Like, having 8 more kind of gives you enough suspicion. Like, their cast is big enough that, like, some of them could be, some of them not could be. New characters could be that we meet down the road, sort of thing. So, like, it's a decent sized number. And I would say if you get too big, then it kind of lessens the impact of it also. Like, oh, there's 20 versions of them. And then it's like, all right, yeah, I guess this week we're learning another one. Cool. And it kind of doesn't make it as big, you know, when we do get to learn another model. So, like, I think 12 to me, like, again, I will leave it up to, like, how they get revealed. But, like, 12 to me, I think is a decent number. 12 and 4 revealed is like, 4 is enough that you can, like, as the series starts, you got enough conflict going on. Like, there's they're not seeing, like, just 2 actors in a room over and over and over again. It's enough where there's, like, conflicts and perspectives and different actors can do things. But not so many that we're burning through them too much. I think it's a nice, I could see they probably had a conversation in the writer's room, and I could see how they landed at this. So, but yeah, that is the end of the mini series. So what do you think of Vera?
It's pretty good. Like, a couple of hiccups, but it's a solid start. It's a strong pitch. I can see why it got picked up.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. Yeah, I think, yeah. Let me put it this way. Like, we'll get into the series, and we'll see if my opinion changes, because it has been since college since I watched this show. I mean, I watched it before college, but I watched it again in college. That was the last time I saw it. But I remember this being, like, I'm like, yeah, I see why this works as a pitch, and I see why this is such a strong beginning, and there's a lot of iconic moments and really a lot of things that work in it, and a lot of good, strong characterization. I think Roslin is like this. Roslin and Baltar are the standout ones for me in terms of characterization. But that being said, I think this is also where some of the clunkier stuff comes in, like the FTL things and like Aaron Doral being revealed to be a Cylon and stuff like that, and also the edgy sexiness of the show is where it's heightened. Again, maybe my memory is warped a little bit, and the series will still have. I'm sure the series will have its own problems as we get into it, as we discuss. But this is the one that sticks out in my mind. It's like, yeah, I definitely see that this is the rougher one, but I also see that it's why it's a strong show that, like, kept going, and I'm excited because I am very excited for the series, because like, let me put it this way: when we've been now that we're getting into the show proper, when we now that we're, like, watching it, I've been rewatching scenes that I love on YouTube recently, just because I'm like, oh, I can't wait till we get to that moment. So, like, I'm very pumped. There's some moments that I'm kind of giddy to experience with you, so I'm pumped about it. that all being said, before we get into... I'm trying to think if I want to do a spoiler minute. Yeah, I'll do a spoiler minute here. So, two things. Let's do the spoiler minute, and then I'll do the last thing before we go. But yeah, spoiler minute. So, for those of you listeners who do not know what spoiler minute is, for the next 60 seconds or so, I am going to start talking about spoilers. Vera is going to give me 60 seconds on the clock and not listen and take off her headphones. So, if you do not want spoilers like Vera, you can do the same or skip ahead 60 seconds. But Vera's going to give me 60 seconds on the clock.
And... go!
All right, so the main thing is Head 6. I did fuck up and say Caprica 6. So hopefully I played it off well enough. Because, yeah, obviously two different characters, Head 6 and Caprica 6. Interesting that Vera caught on to the God thing. Like her saying, I want you to love me, and God is love, considering the end reveal of who Head 6 is at the very end of the series. I forgot how long they, play that out, but, it was interesting because I always remember the reveal of Head 6 at the end of the series being something like, did they just contrive that she's an angel? I'll just say it. But, there are decent enough hints right here at the beginning that was their intention all along, which is interesting. So we'll see how that shakes out as the series goes along, if I get the hints of they shift a direction, but at least seems to be the intention. I think it's the only major thing I want to talk about. There's a bunch of other things, but that's the big thing that I'll hit upon here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention. No, I mean, obviously we'll talk about more as we go. But. All righty. Only thing I want to mention before we do anything else, just for listeners, just to tease, next week, which will be the first full episode of the series that we will be watching, titled 33, we are going to have a very special guest for the episode that I'm very excited about. So be prepared and excited for that. But beyond that, that's everything I had. Do you have anything else, Vera?
Nah.
Alrighty then. Then with that said, stuff time.
Stuff! You can find my stuff by looking for Council of Geeks. Patreon pays the bills. YouTube is the main thing that funds. I don't feel like looking at a calendar and figuring out what'll be new. Just there's new videos every week. I'm still on a weekly schedule, so go ahead and check that out. Break Room of Geeks for less scripted and more rambly videos on whatever I have watched, listened to, played, or read lately. And you can also find Council of Geeks on Twitch, where I stream Wednesdays and Fridays. That's the geeky stuff. If you prefer the spicy stuff, you can look for Vera Wild. Wild is spelled W-Y-L-D-E. And you can find content on YouTube.
All right, you can find my stuff at Jesse Jitter. That's where I do my video essay style stuff on YouTube. I'm not gonna look either. Go check out my channel. I release usually a video a month. I have a secondary channel called Jesse Jinder After Dark, where I do news, reviews, reactions. I will be reviewing Severance and Daredevil Born Again as they come out, and those should be coming up. Severance is ongoing. Daredevil will be very soon, as well as other random stuff on that channel. I am on Blue Sky, is the main social media thing that I use. So you can follow me there. But I am also on Nebula as well, which is the streaming service that houses my movie Identity. So go check out that. And I am also on Patreon, that helps me pay my bills. So if you want to support me and get videos early and maybe some extra little bonus videos that I put up from time to time, that will be there too. Anything else, Vera?
No, I think that'll do.
Alrighty then. Well, I hope everyone lives long and prospers.
Be seeing you.